Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is one of the most recognizable names in Congress. To some people, she is the face of a new progressive left. To others, she is a symbol of everything they oppose. But recognition is not the same thing as a record. So this is not a hype video, it is not a takedown, and it is not a personality profile. This is VoteTrace, a source-backed look at what the records say, what her campaign says, what she has sponsored, how she has voted, and what one House member can actually do. Because with a figure this visible, the biggest mistake is treating the viral image as if it were the official record. Start with the official snapshot. House Clerk data identifies Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as a Democratic House member from New York's 14th District with BioGuide ID 000172. FEC records list her as a Democratic candidate for House New York District 14, candidate ID H8NY5148, with the authorized committee Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for Congress, committee ID CO06395591. Those details sound dry, but they matter because they tell us what lane we are actually evaluating. We are not evaluating a president. We are not evaluating a governor. We are not evaluating a cabinet secretary. We are evaluating one member of the U.S. House of Representatives, a very visible one, but still one House seat. That distinction shapes the entire episode. A House member has real power, but it is specific power. A member can vote on bills, rules, amendments, and resolutions. They can sponsor legislation, co-sponsor other members' bills, serve on committees, question witnesses, push amendments, request oversight, help constituents navigate federal agencies, and use public attention to move an issue onto the agenda. But one House member cannot pass a law alone. They cannot run a federal agency. They cannot command the military. They cannot unilaterally spend federal money. And they cannot turn a campaign platform into law just by announcing it. That is why VoteTrace separates four things that often get blended together online: what a candidate says, what a member sponsors, how a member votes, and what government actually does. AOC's public profile is national. Her formal office is one House seat. The gap between those two things is where the real story begins. Official House Clerk records place Ocasio-Cortez on Energy and Commerce in the 119th Congress. Committee roster captures also list her on Energy, Health, and Oversight and Investigations. That is not just a resume line. Energy and Commerce touches areas that show up all over her public agenda: health policy, energy policy, environmental regulation, consumer protection, technology, and oversight of powerful industries and federal agencies. Committees are where a lot of congressional work happens before the public sees a final floor vote. Hearings are held there. Bills are shaped there. Oversight questions are asked there. Members build issue lanes there. So if the public image is built around big national debates, the committee record points to the institutional lane: health, energy, oversight, and regulation. That does not mean she controls those areas. It means those are part of the official workspace where her House role can operate. Now separate the campaign platform from the official record. Her campaign platform is broad, explicit, and progressive. It calls for Medicare for all and frames healthcare as a universal guarantee, not something tied to employment. On housing, her campaign emphasizes housing as a human right, affordable housing construction, public housing repair, and stronger protections for renters and homeowners. On climate, it centers the Green New Deal, linking clean energy transition, jobs, infrastructure, and environmental justice. On labor and the economy, the campaign emphasizes unions, labor standards, public jobs, and investment in communities rather than corporations. On immigration, the campaign calls for a path for undocumented immigrants and for abolishing ICE. On Puerto Rico, it emphasizes recovery investment, debt relief, and self-determination. And on public safety, the campaign frames safety through social investment, housing, healthcare, education, support services, rather than a policing-first model. Those are campaign-authored positions. They matter because they tell voters what she says she supports. But a platform is not the same thing as enacted law. So the next question is, what shows up in the official legislative record? Congress.gov captures for Ocasio-Cortez list 71 sponsored items in the dataset we captured. Sponsorship is important, but it needs plain English context. Sponsoring a bill shows what a member is trying to introduce into the legislative system. It does not mean the bill became law. The examples line up with the campaign themes. There are Green New Deal resolutions, climate and public investment proposals associated with her early national profile. There is the Green New Deal for Public Housing Act, connecting climate policy with housing infrastructure. There is the Place to Prosper Act, connected to the broader housing and anti-poverty agenda. There is the Fair Wages for Home Care Workers Act, tied to labor and the care economy. There is the 10% credit card interest rate cap act, aimed at consumer finance costs. And there is the 9/11 Immigrant Worker Freedom Act, tied to immigration and worker protections. The pattern is clear. The bills she sponsors are heavily aligned with the campaign platform. Healthcare-adjacent labor, housing, climate, immigration, and consumer cost issues. But again, sponsorship is an agenda signal. It is not the same thing as passage. For floor action, we need votes. Here are 6 official vote cards that help map the record, without pretending that 6 votes explain everything. First, war powers and Somalia. In 2023, Ocasio-Cortez voted yay on HCon.Reson 30, a war powers resolution directing the removal of U.S. forces from Somalia, except for embassy protection. The resolution failed. This is the cleanest match to her campaign's foreign policy language: skepticism toward unauthorized military deployments and emphasis on Congress's constitutional war powers role. The record here is simple. On this war powers resolution, she voted yay. Second, the FY 2023 National Defense Authorization Act. In 2022, she voted nay on passage of H.R. 7900, the FY 2023 Defense Authorization Bill. The bill passed the House. This is not a procedural rule card. This was a passage vote on a major defense policy bill. So the record shows a nay vote on a major national defense authorization package, consistent with a broader pattern of skepticism toward defense spending and military policy packages. But the vote alone does not tell us every reason for that vote. It tells us what she did on the floor. Third, the 2024 Supplemental Package Rule. This one needs careful wording because it was a rule vote. A rule vote is not the same thing as final passage of every bill underneath it. A rule sets up how the House will consider legislation, how debate works, what amendments are allowed, and how the package moves to the floor. In 2024, Ocasio-Cortez voted nay on H.Res. 1160, the rule setting up House consideration of supplemental bills related to Israel, Ukraine, the Indo-Pacific, and other measures. The rule passed, so the accurate phrasing is not, she voted against every underlying bill in final form. The accurate phrasing is, she voted nay on the rule for considering that supplemental package. That distinction matters. Fourth, a public safety package rule. In 2022, she voted nay on HRS. 1377, the rule for considering a package of public safety bills, including community violence, policing, clearance rate, and mental health response measures. The rule passed narrowly. Again, this is a rule vote, so we should not flatten it into a claim about final passage of every bill in the package. What the official record shows is narrower and more precise. She voted nay on the rule that structured consideration of the package. That makes it a useful card precisely because it forces procedural literacy. The headline version is easy. The actual vote record is more specific. Fifth, the Cops Counseling Act. In 2021, Ocasio-Cortez voted nay on suspension passage of S-1502, the Cops Counseling Act. The bill passed overwhelmingly and later became Public Law 11760. This is a strong contrast card because it involves law enforcement peer support and counseling, and the bill had overwhelming House support. But the same caution applies. A recorded nay vote is a fact. The roll call alone does not explain the reason for that vote. Without a captured statement explaining the vote, the source-locked claim is that she voted nay, the bill passed overwhelmingly, and it became law. Sixth, the Deploying American Blockchains Act. In 2024, she voted nay on suspension passage of H.R. 6572. The bill passed the House and was referred to the Senate. This card matters because it keeps the record from becoming only a foreign policy or policing montage. It shows a nay vote on a technology and economic development bill, not just on defense or public safety legislation. Again, the record gives us the vote and the outcome. It does not by itself give us motive. Taken together, these cards show a record that is more specific than the viral image. The record shows a yay vote on a war powers resolution about Somalia. It shows nay votes on major defense and security-related packages. It shows nay votes on some bills or rules that passed with broad support. It shows that procedural votes matter, especially rule votes, where a member may be voting on the terms of consideration rather than final passage of an underlying bill. And it shows that her floor record includes some votes that fit her campaign themes clearly, and some votes that require more context before anyone should claim to know the reason. What the record does not prove is motive. A roll call can tell us how a member voted. Congress.gov can tell us what the bill was. The House Clerk can tell us the vote result. But unless we have a statement, floor remark, press release, or other sourced explanation, the vote record should not be treated as a mind reader. Votes are facts. Motives need sources. This brings us back to the central mismatch. AOC's public profile is national. Her actual office is one House seat. That does not make the office powerless. A House member can shape debates, introduce bills, pressure agencies, question witnesses, build coalitions, and vote on legislation that affects the country. But it does mean the record should be read at the correct scale. Campaign platform is not law. Sponsorship is not enactment. Visibility is not the same thing as power. And a vote is not automatically a full explanation of motive. The useful question is not whether the public image is flattering or hostile. The useful question is, what does each source actually show? For Ocasio-Cortez, the record shows a highly visible progressive House member whose campaign platform, sponsored legislation, committee lane, and selected votes broadly point toward healthcare, housing, climate, labor, immigration, public safety reform, war powers, and skepticism toward major defense and security packages. It also shows the limits of any shortcut. If you want the real picture, you have to separate the layers. That is the VoteTrace frame for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Not personality, not punditry, but a map of the record. Official records identify the office, district, committee lane, and recorded votes. Campaign pages show what she says she supports. Congress.gov shows what she has sponsored. House Clerk roll calls show how she voted. And the limits of the office show what one House member can realistically do. The sources for this profile are listed in the description. If we missed a source, if there is a vote you think belongs in the next version, or if you disagree with how a card should be framed, leave it in the comments. VoteTrace is about checking the record, not asking you to trust a narrator. Check the sources, check your ballot, and decide for yourself. Like and subscribe for more source-backed candidate explainers. And tell us who VoteTrace should trace next.